This is Mark Anderson with Anderson Seed and Garden. Our summer parking lot sale is underway. For a limited time, save big on all kinds of plants and trees. Fruit trees are now 30% off. Anderson's beautiful, colorful hanging baskets are 40% off, and perennials are now 25% off too. Also, get ahead of those nasty grasshoppers with sprays, baits, and repellents. Anderson's has all kinds of options for you to stop them right now. It's also time to apply Hydrotain to make your watering go 30 to 50% farther in this heat. Anderson Seed and Garden, 69 West Center in Logan. Online at andersonseedandgarden.com.
Ready for our little forest adventure?
Yes!
There's a forest closer than you think. Find a park or forest near you and music inspired by nature at discovertheforest.org. Brought to you by USDA Forest Service and the Ad Council.
Prepare for tomorrow at ready.gov/today. Brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council.
News Talk 610 AM, 102.1 FM, KVNU.
It's time for the Garden Guide with your host, Mark Anderson from Anderson Seed and Garden.
New research suggests that people are more likely to eat vegetables if they have a tempting name.
What would life be without homegrown tomatoes? Only two things that money can't buy, and that's true love and homegrown tomatoes.
From gardening to landscaping.
Today we are going to try and create garden eyebrows. Kind of like the flowers are sprouting directly from your hair. That makes sense.
Phone lines are open at 753-KVNU or 800-369-KVNU.
Kind of like eating vegetables.
It's the Garden Guide, now on KVNU 610 AM and 102 FM.
And we welcome you to the show on this beautiful, partly cloudy Saturday morning, as temperatures expected to be back into the mid-90s, and it has been a hot week. And of course that's had a big impact on lawns and gardens, and we're going to be talking about that along with a lot of other things this morning with Mark Anderson of Anderson Seed and Garden. And Mark, I'm sure it's probably one of the questions you're getting a lot right now is, how much do I need to water my lawn?
We get that question all the time.
Because we had several days where we peaked, and it was just a brief moment we were hitting in the 100s, but that's still hot.
It's hot. Yeah.
High 90s, 100s. Yeah, that is really tough. But on the other side of it, if you stay on top of the watering, my garden, as I mentioned, I planted late this year because of a family trip. And so, man, those little plants, they are doubling in size about every other day.
Just growing like crazy. Yeah. So I was out in my garden last night, and I was checking out the tomatoes, and some of them have grown to the top of the tomato cages already. Yeah, they're just growing like crazy. And I've got cantaloupes that have flowers on them. I've got zucchinis that'll be ready to pick this weekend. I mean, they're just all going like crazy. Of course, I've had to try and control grasshoppers a little bit. Had to deal with the weather being up and down, so fluctuations of really hot, then like really really cool, and then really hot, then really really cool. So it's been a little difficult for the plants to get acclimated to the summer. It's just been kind of some odd weather this year, because it has been cold and it has been hot and it has been wet and it has been really dry. So we've just had like a little bit of everything. Yeah, we've had just a little bit of everything. But the plants seem to be responding really well. So my potatoes look amazing, and I've got peppers that have full size peppers on there already. So I mean they've set really early, really quickly this year. So I'm kind of surprised on the pepper plants. They're kind of going nuts. So it's been good for growing. It's been good for growing vegetables. And if you've been noticing, the flowers on Center Street and the hanging baskets on Main Street, they're all just looking amazing right now. And when we first planted the flower beds on Center, it's kind of sparse, and there's not a whole lot in there, and they don't look very good because they kind of take a little while to get accustomed to their new location, so they're a little wilty. And it's not even been 4 weeks yet since we planted them.
Since you planted?
Yeah, it's been 3.5 weeks, and some of those plants are already filling in those flower beds. And some of them we planted more than 2 feet apart, and they're already starting to fill in and almost touch each other. So doesn't take very long when the sun finally shines.
Yeah. Well, a lot we want to talk about today, and again, we want to mention to our listeners and apologize to our listeners that as we have begun this transition of a remodel of our studios. Phone lines are not working this morning, so we aren't able to take calls. We are getting close.
I'm seeing progress in the construction.
It is. It is very close. Let's see. It was Thursday. We were talking. We brought in the new console, the new table that'll be in the studio. Everything is now set up. We're just putting in microphones and a few other things, and we're hoping that this week we'll be moving back in, and then we'll be back to normal, as we say.
We were kind of shooting for the first part of July.
Yeah.
When we discussed, and we were hoping maybe sooner.
Well, I know for a while when we started telling you that we were remodeling the studios, and this was last year at about this time.
Right.
Yeah, this has been a project that has been years in the making, and so, yeah, it's definitely taken a while, but thanks to our engineers for keeping on it and getting things done, and hoping next week we'll be back. But in the meantime, we've got a lot we'll be able to talk about just as far as things that we're seeing around the neighborhood, around town. A lot of events that are coming up that we want to mention, too, for those who are wanting questions and answers about how to be able to do certain things. There's always some great community support here. Utah State is an incredible resource, and we'll be able to talk about some of those things that are happening in the next week and a half. But you mentioned it as we were starting. The overall probably number one question you're getting is watering.
Yes.
And how to be able to know, am I watering enough? Am I not watering? I see as I walk around our neighborhood, a lot of lawns losing that green, beautiful, lush color. They're starting to go a little brown, but that's not necessarily a reason to panic.
No, it's not, and it's not just how do I water my lawns, but it's like, how do I water my garden? How do I water my landscape plants? And I think in many cases we're over watering the plants more than what they really need, and it's just kind of a cultural thing. We have to water 3 times a week to keep the lawn looking good, but then we think we have to water our landscape that much. We have to water our vegetables that much, and they can go with a lot less and do really quite well. So with turf, and before the show we talked about there's a water conservation seminar coming up, and that's in conjunction with Utah State and Logan City. And did you find the details?
Yeah,
on that?
In fact, our Charlie Scheel had done a story on it a couple days ago, and it is coming up July 10th, and this is a free. That's a week and a half from now.
That's a Wednesday.
Yeah,
that's a Wednesday.
Be a Wednesday night, so a week and a half from now. It's going to be held in the new Logan Library in the community room, which is right there on the main floor. That can seat up to maybe 150?
Yeah.
I know when we had the grand opening of the library, we probably had 200 people in that room.
Yeah.
So plenty of seating. This is a free event. It'll start at 5:30 and go to about 8 o'clock. The idea behind this is there will be several guest speakers from Utah State. J.D. Gunnell will also be there from USU Extension. And the topic is going to be how to be able to water here in the West.
Yes.
And
I know they're planning on focusing on landscapes and turf and all kinds of different options. So even if you don't have a lawn, they're going to be talking about different ways to water properly for other things other than just turf.
Plants, gardens, everything. Again, that'll be from 5:30 to 8. In the new Logan Library, the community room A of the library.
On July 10th, which is a Wednesday. So,
and if you want more details on that, you can go to cachevalleydaily.com.
Yeah.
And that story he did about 3 days ago.
Yeah. So this week, just in my own yard, I've used 3 different types of watering devices. So my sprinklers come on twice a week for our turf, and we've added some hydrotane to our grass to really help absorb and retain the moisture. So there's some there's some amazing products out there that will help you conserve water that you can use that will keep your lawn looking amazing, but you can use 30 to 50% less water to keep it looking that way. So using the hydrotane or a product like Back to Green, which has some iron in there as well as the soil penetrant, that type of product will allow you to water twice a week and still keep your lawn looking great. So if you've been watering 3 times a week, you could apply this and eliminate one whole watering. And the key with turf is to make sure that you get about 1 inch to 1.5 inches of water applied per week. And that can be in 2 or 3 applications. So if you're doing 2 applications a week, try and shoot for 3/4 of an inch of water with each application. With my particular sprinklers, I have gear-driven sprinklers that move around. So they're not rain birds, but they're gear-driven, so they don't hit the same spot all the time. They move around, so they have little gears in them that move the head. 40 to 50 minutes is what it takes to put out about 3/4 of an inch. So about 30 to 40 minutes on those types of sprinklers. The pop-up sprinklers, the one that pop up and spray the entire area that they cover all at the same time, those take about 20 to 30 minutes to put out that much water. So they're not doing as large of an area, and so they do it in a shorter amount of time, but they also spray the whole area at the same time. So 2 to 3 applications, 1 inch to 1.5 inches of water with for the entire week. So split that up in 1/2 inch increments or 3/4 inch increments, and that will keep your lawn looking amazing all summer long. But not only am I using sprinklers, but in my vegetable garden I've got soaker hoses set up, and so down each row of my garden, whether it's potatoes or whether it's my onions or whether it's my peas or my carrots and beets, I've got all in the one row. I use soaker hoses, but I'm only watering every 4 to 5 days on those, even with the heat. And I'll turn those soakers on very slow, low pressure, very slow trickle, and I'll leave them on for 6 to 8 hours, and just let them saturate in. And it uses very little water, puts the water right directly into the root zone for the plants, and then I can go like 4 or 5 days between waterings. So I'm only watering once a week, almost twice a week. And the plants seem to be responding really, really, really well. And then in other parts of my garden, I have drip system. And so on the drip system, the hose that distributes the water doesn't like emit water, but then I've got drip hose that has drippers built into it about every 6 to 12 inches. And then each one of those emitters will put out a gallon of water per hour. And so I can turn the drip system on for a half an hour and saturate all those plants. So it's great for squashes, melons, cucumbers. It's amazing for tomatoes or peppers. You can just water individual plants, and then all the space in between those plants doesn't get water. So then you don't have to worry about weeds coming up. Yeah, because wherever you water is where all the weeds come up. So between the drip system and the soakers, I can put the water right down the rows, right into the root zone of the plants, and not worry about watering all the space in between. So not only does it save work with watering, because I just turn those soakers on and go to work, and then come home and switch them to 4 more rows and go to bed, and they just water on their own, but I don't have to weed as much.
Well, and for someone who's saying, well, I've already planted my garden, I can't really dig it up, put in soaker hoses or a drip line system. One of the things we did this past year, last season, and then we've continued to do it this year, is that we just go out, and rather than just turning the rainbird on and trying to water the entire garden, we'll just go out and just water the specific plants. So we have all of our squashes together, and it takes about 15 minutes. But that way you're putting the water right on those plants, and you're not having all of the extra area getting watered and just, right, like you said, creating weeds. And on top of that, we don't have to water as often.
Exactly. So setting up the drip system, which I did this week for my pumpkins and my squashes and melons and cucumbers, it took me about an hour and a half, but I'll bet I did an area that was 1,500 to 2,000 square feet. And so just running that drip system, it took a little bit of effort and a little bit of work, but just lay it right on top of the surface, so it's really, really easy to do. Same thing with the soaker hoses. You can just run it right down the rows, and I've got is like a hose splitter, so it splits it into 4 different hose bibs, and so I can run 4 different hoses off the same system. I've just made some longer pieces of hose. Some are like 4 feet long, and some are 8 feet long, and I can run 4 rows at the same time off of the same water source, but it splits it into 4 different different areas that I can cover. It works amazing. I mean, it really saves so much time, and the plants love it because it puts that water right down the root zone, and it works amazing.
Great.
Yeah, works great.
Okay, so great tips on being able to water your garden, water your lawn. Again, that free community event will be coming up July 10th, Logan Library. Yeah. Community room, 5:30 to 8. We'll talk more about that coming up again next week. Now, you mentioned another big question I'm sure you're getting a lot of is, what do you do with grasshoppers? And this almost seems to be a topic we're talking about every single week.
Yeah, almost every week.
But it's something that you really do. You have to be fighting it constantly. We dusted our raspberries 2 weeks ago. We're going to do it again this week.
Yeah.
We sprayed our garden because it was just starting to come up last week.
Right.
We're going to be doing that again next week. Yeah. If you want to stay on top of the grasshoppers, it's going to be a constant battle this year.
They have voracious appetites.
Yeah. And they're getting bigger.
They're getting bigger, yeah. And the bigger they get, the more they eat and the faster they eat. Mm-hmm. So they were starting to work their way into my garden, so I used a repellent to keep them out. But along the edges, especially where my beans are and where my potatoes are, they just kept coming in, even with the repellent. And so this week I had to get a little serious and spray for them. Mm-hmm. And so I sprayed on, I think it was Tuesday night. And the best time to spray is in the evening. So I'll wait until the sun's pretty much gone down, but it's still light outside. So we're talking 8:30, almost 9 o'clock, since the daylight hours are so long right now. And I sprayed with a product called Bug Blaster from High Yield. So the Bug Blaster is safe to use on all kinds of ornamentals, but it's not labeled for use on vegetables. So I sprayed all the way around my garden. I sprayed around the barn, which is where there's some dry grasses that are starting to show up. I sprayed right along the property line between my neighbor and they've got a field right next door, and then my garden's right next to that. And so that's where a lot of the grasshoppers come from, because they're coming from the field out there. And so as soon as a lot of their food source starts to dry up, whether it's the foothills are starting to turn brown with the grasses, or the farmer next door cut down his alfalfa field, and all of a sudden their food source is not there. It's not there anymore. And so that's when you really got to watch for them coming over. But I sprayed the Bug Blaster, and like the next day I went out and started weeding in my garden, and it had cut down the grasshoppers from thousands down to about 10.
Nice.
So I saw a few grasshoppers hopping around, and then I grabbed my Sayonara, which is safe for use on vegetables and fruits, and I used the Sayonara on some of the plants that are starting to produce fruit. Mm-hmm. And so I was able to spray the peas, which we're picking right now and consuming. I was able to spray the carrots and the beets and the chard, which the grasshoppers are having a heyday with. But the beans were what they were really going after, because they were just kind of right along that area where there was that dead grass that was just kind of, gone. So they were like going for the next green thing nearby, and I sprayed those. And then I was out last night in the garden, and I think I saw like 2 grasshoppers. So it took care of the rest. But what I did see that kind of surprised me, squash bug.
Oh, really?
Saw the first squash bug on my butternut squash. I was not thrilled. Yeah, I was not happy about that. And they're kind of a grayish brown and just very distinctive looking. It's like, nope, I'm not going to deal with that. So that's really why I got the Sayonara out. And so I really sprayed around my zucchinis.
Squashes.
Yeah, so I hit the zucchinis, and I hit all the butternut and the delicata squashes, and I think I've got some kabocha as well too, and then the pumpkins. There's no way I'm letting those stupid squash bugs get into my giant pumpkins. So had to get serious about those. But we've been spraying for powdery mildew too. And so I do a combination of the Sayonara with the Fungicide 5 from Fertilum. And so the combination of those two products, super, super effective. I just do an amazing job. And one takes care of diseases, and one takes care of insects. And I'm starting to see more diseases. So I had samples this week, customers bringing in early blight on their potatoes, and it can also get onto tomato plants. And so early blight makes the plants look like they're not getting enough water. You'll see these kind of round concentric circles that show up on the leaves. So you get these kind of funny brown looking spots on the leaves, but it's almost like a bullseye, but it's an irregular shaped bullseye. because you'll see these kind of concentric rings that get bigger as they spread out. And I've seen that on a couple plants, and that is easily prevented with a disease control like the fungicide 5. So the fungicide 5 is a natural bacteria, but it's a good bacteria instead of a bad bacteria, and it fights off all kinds of diseases like powdery mildew and leaf spots and rusts. But it works on early blight, it works on late blight, which get into tomatoes and potatoes. It works on verticillium and fusarium, so I water my plants with it, and it fights those diseases off from the soil as well as on the leaves. And it has been super, super effective on all my plants so far. No signs of diseases, and all the tomato plant, I planted 30 tomato plants. Every tomato plant is lush and green and gorgeous and beautiful, but I am fertilizing them twice a week.
Okay.
Yeah, so they're getting fed twice a week. So that's why my plants have all of a sudden decided that they're going to grow 3-4 feet tall, and they are just growing like
Taking
crazy.
off.
And they're starting to set fruit already. I mean, that's awesome.
Wow.
To have fruit set already. The end of June, we've got like nice fruit set on a lot of those plants. And I was really surprised when I started taking some of the covers off of my peppers. They have fruit on the peppers peppers already. Yep. Growing a new chili pepper, and it has peppers on it that are 4 inches long already.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm like super, super excited.
Here we are at the end of June.
Yep,
That's impressive.
But I am using a couple new products to experiment with, and so I've been impressed so far.
So Sayonara Bug Blaster.
Yep.
Also, we've talked about using 7 in the past.
Yep.
That's
7's
something that we
awesome.
used.
Yep. 7 is great for the grasshoppers, and it has a very short limitation from when you spray to when you can harvest. It probably has the shortest interval. So with most vegetables, we're talking 24 hours. So if you were to spray this morning, you could harvest your produce tomorrow afternoon, tomorrow night, rinse it off, wash it well, and then go ahead and eat it, and the residue from the insecticide would be gone already. Yeah. And so, but it will give you a nice long residual and control those insects as they're starting to come back into the garden. So when you spray and you knock down that many grasshoppers, sometimes all it takes is a week or 10 days, and they're kind of coming back already. That's why I like to use the repellent so much, because once you knock that initial wave of grasshoppers down, tens of thousands, and then you put your repellent down, then you can keep them from coming back into your garden, and it's really quite effective.
Yeah.
And
effective. We found, like you mentioned, not only do you want to spray your garden, but also around your garden. We have a field to the south of us, and that's where we find that most of them are coming in. I also found that they were also coming in under the fence from my neighbor's property. I don't know if they like the dandelions over in her yard more than they like the dandelions in our yard, but it seemed as I was mowing the lawn last Saturday, all these grasshoppers are along the fence line. And so, you want to make sure you hit that area as well, because they'll still make it to your garden.
It's better to get them before they get to your garden than after they're already in your garden. It's just easier to prevent. And they're almost always coming from that undeveloped lot next door or the field out back. And they tend to lay their eggs in areas where the soil is undisturbed. And so they're not going to lay their eggs in your garden, especially if you're tilling it in the fall.
We're out there working it constantly, weeding.
It's just not a place where they're going to lay eggs. It's going to be in spots where the soil is undisturbed, and that's where they're going to lay eggs, because they're more likely to hatch that way. And so that's why we've had so many grasshoppers the last couple of years, is because we've had some really heavy hatches.
Okay. So watch out for grasshoppers, squash bugs. You mentioned you're starting to see those.
And the Sayonara and the 7 work amazing on the squash bugs. And what happens with the squash bugs is when those larvae hatch out, they burrow into the vines right where they come up out of the ground, and it disrupts the sap flow going through the vines. So your plants will look perfect one day, and then you go out there 2 days later, and they're laying flat on the ground like they haven't been watered. And you're like, I just watered that other night. It should be fine. It just damages the circulatory system of the plant to the point where whole vines will just die off. Your entire zucchini plant will just keel over dead.
The problem is once they've burrowed in, it's too late.
Oh, it's too late. Yeah. You have to completely prevent. So you can use a dust. High Yield makes a great dust. It's called multi-use dust. They also have the garden, pet, and livestock dust that it works great if you want to use a dust. I prefer the spray because I can get in up underneath the leaves because that's where they tend to lay their eggs, is up underneath the leaves. So I'll use either the 7 or the Sayonara or the indoor-outdoor permethrin from High Yield. That's really, really good as well too. So those have been excellent products for squash bugs, and you've got to prevent the squash bugs before they do damage. So as soon as I saw that one the other night, I was like, oh, we got to do some preventative because
they're coming.
Too much work on the giant pumpkins, just too much work. So I've got a pumpkin like set
that's already coming on.
I've got one that's set, and I've got 2 more that I think I'm going to set, and then we'll let it kind of progress for a little while and see which one's growing the fastest, and then we'll take the other ones off. So
okay,
yeah, so we're making some progress.
And about how big are the plants now?
Plants are 15 by 12.
Okay.
Yeah, so I've got 2 plants, and they are taking up a 15-foot long, 16-foot long by at least 12-foot wide. They could be about as wide as they are long.
It's right about now. The size of this.
Yeah, they're just
this temporary studio we're in.
bigger than this room. Yeah, bigger than this room. So they are cruising.
Okay.
Talking about cruising, the Cruise In.
Yeah,
is this week. Yeah. It's this weekend. So it starts on Thursday, and 4th of July is coming up. So happy 4th to everyone. And Gardener's Market's every Saturday.
Hey, and we'll be talking about some of the things that are happening at the store coming up here as we come back. You're listening to The Garden Guide here on KVNU. With your local news update, I'm Will Feelwright. The news this hour is brought to you by The Duck Hunter. Well, a lawsuit filed against Tim Ballard by a woman who alleged deceptive practices and misconduct has been dismissed by a Utah judge. Now, the case, filed by Jordana Bree Ryder back in November of last year against Ballard, was dismissed this past week due to a lack of evidence provided and deception. Now, Ryder, who was hired as an independent contractor for Operation Underground Railroad, had been required to go to a strip club in Salt Lake City so that she could prove herself to Tim Ballard and Matt Cooper, where she was sexually touched under false pretense, according to the lawsuit. Now, on a separate occasion, Ryder had claimed that she was badly injured during an OUR training and that Ballard had refused to call an ambulance because he did not want the event on record. Now, in response to the dismissal of the lawsuit, Ballard released a statement that read that the case was based on vague allegations with no supporting facts and that he was grateful that the court recognized that. And Vice President Kamala Harris touched down in Utah hours after the presidential debate on Friday that had left some Democrats calling for President Biden to drop out of the race. Harris landed at the Utah Air National Guard Base in Salt Lake City Friday afternoon on Air Force 2. Instead of any fanfare, though, she was quickly whisked away to raise campaign money. Her motorcade took her to a gated community in Park City where donors were awaiting, each contributing between $1,000 to $100,000 to be in attendance. Well, a really nice forecast as we're going to continue to see clear skies, temperatures staying in the mid-90s. And as we head into this next week, it's going to cool off just a little for us with highs in the high 80s and overnight temperatures over the next week expected to stay right around the mid-50s. Will Feelwright for KVNU News.
From ABC Sports, I'm Chuck Severson. The wait is finally over for rising hockey star Macklin Celebrini, who was the first to hear his name called at last night's NHL draft.
With the first overall selection in the 2024 NHL draft, the San Jose Sharks are very proud to select from Boston University, Macklin Celebrini.
Sharks legend Joe Thornton announcing the pick last night live from the Las Vegas Sphere. The Sharks selecting their center of the future out of Boston College. Celebrini talked to ESPN's Leah Hextall after being drafted.
Just a surreal feeling. I've dreamed about this moment ever since I was a kid, and for it to come true, it's an amazing feeling.
A blockbuster trade in the National Basketball Association. ESPN's Adrian Wojnarowski reported last night that the Hawks have dealt DeJounte Murray to the Pelicans in exchange for Larry Nance Jr., Dyson Daniels, and 2 firsts. To baseball, Yankees at the Blue Jays, top 6 with 2 on and down 3-1. Juan Soto up to bat.
3-0 on the way. Swung on with the green light and hit deep to right, way back there. Adios, amigo. Oh, what a bomb to right. by Juan Soto, a 3-run homer.
On WFAN, New York would pile it on 16-5, the final. More AL, the Orioles over the Blue Jays 2-1, and the Royals beat the Guardians 10-3. National League, the Phillies down the Marlins 2-0 behind a Christopher Sanchez complete game shutout. The Brewers beat the Cubs 4-2, and the Braves chopped the Pirates 6-1. Interleague, Mets 7, Astros 2, the final, and the Padres defeated the Red Sox 9-2. Chuck Severson, ABC Sports.
Imagine your wedding day. Elegant, simple, yet stunning, stress-free. It's your day. It's all about you. Whether you're looking for small and simple or have a grander idea, the Riverwoods Conference Center will accommodate your every need. Choose the inside ballroom elegance or outside along the natural decor of the beautiful Logan River. A Riverwoods event planner will work personally with you to make sure your event is exactly how you've envisioned it. The Riverwoods Conference Center, where your happily ever after begins. Google Riverwoods Conference Center or call 750-5151.
Water getting inside your home? Driveway cracking? Your deck need cleaning or sealing? Hey, Gary Sullivan here from At Home with Gary Sullivan. I can help you with those home improvement projects each weekend right here. In fact, we'll take your calls about your home issues and give you solutions. We'll tell you how to fix it, what to use, and where to get it. We'll also have expert guests to help you with your projects. Hope you can join us this weekend right here on At Home with Gary Sullivan.
Saturday nights at 7 on News Talk KVNU, 102 FM at 610 AM. Taking the guesswork out of gardening. It's the Garden Guide with Mark Anderson from Anderson Seed and Garden on News Talk KVNU, 610 AM and 102.1 FM.
Welcome back to the Garden Guide here on KVNU as we're enjoying a few clouds on this Saturday morning. Temperatures headed towards, as we're mentioning in the news break, mid-90s today and tomorrow. But then 80s back for next week. So
it looks really nice next week. If it cools down for the 4th, like it kind of looks like it's going to, we might be having hot chocolate on the 4th.
A little bit.
Instead of hot dogs,
we'll
be having hot chocolate.
Now, you mentioned before we went to the break, the cruise in will get underway next Thursday and then continue through the week, and then of course the cruise in parade down Main Street that'll be next Saturday night.
That's Saturday.
Lot going on at Anderson Seed and Garden for the next week.
We do. We have a lot of good sales going on right now. In fact, not only do we have grasshopper spray
that everybody needs to just should put that right by the counter and just
exactly grasshopper. Every 9 out of 10 people coming in the store right now are coming in for grasshoppers. Or some other insect. But we've got our perennials are on sale. So perennials are 25% off on all of our perennials right now in 1-gallon containers. So that includes the hostas and that includes the columbines and the coral bells. And so all the perennials are 25% off. We do have some annuals that we've started to discount as well too, and they're at least half price, and some of them are even better than that. So we do have some annuals left. And then we have fruit trees are 30% off, and I've got a really good selection of fruit trees. In fact, I've got a few at my house that I've been kind of nursing along because they just didn't really want to leaf out with everybody else. They were just kind of slow, and they're starting to look really good. So I have some more nectarines at my house. I've got a few more peaches. I got a few apricots. So I have some really good varieties I'm going to bring down this next week. 30% off on the fruit trees. And then our hanging baskets, we had those on sale for 40% off, but there's only a few left. And so we dropped them down to I think they're $6 or $8 a piece. So they're just really, really inexpensive. And they were $35 to start off with. So we're just trying to find homes for them.
Okay.
We're just trying to find homes for them. And I looked the other day and I think I have 2 giant pumpkins left.
Okay,
so 2 giant pumpkins if somebody wants to try and do a giant pumpkin. It's getting a little bit late because this is the time when you need to get that fruit set on there.
So
you have 90 to 100 days to grow them before the weigh off so you can get them as big as possible. So I was hoping to have fruit set by the first of the week, but it's going to be this weekend. I've got 1, but I wanted to get 2 more on there. So I'm hoping by Monday I'll have another 2 set.
All right.
So we'll see what happens. But those are the specials going on at Anderson's. Of course, we have a lot of people don't think about it, but we have misters at Anderson's. And so we've got like portable misters that you can hook to a hose and just like strap on the post on your porch that has like misters on there. I've got like mist systems that are like 10 to 12 feet long that have multiple misters in there. And I've got some that are self-supporting that stand up, and you just hook your hose to it, and then it puts out this really nice mist. So when it's really hot, you can have a mister going on your porch or on your patio or on your deck or whatever, and
it helps keep it cool.
Yeah. So we've got some shade systems, we've got shade cloth, we've got shade umbrellas, and we have misters, and the misters work awesome. It really cools your environment down by about 10, 15 degrees.
Okay.
Yeah, so if it's 90 degrees outside, you get your mister going, it feels like it's 78.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, feels really, really good. And then moving into the 4th of July, this is time for the next application of fertilizer. So perfect time between the 4th of July and about the 24th of July to use some humate to really perk your lawn back up. So humate would be great. Hydrotain or back to green if you're struggling to keep your grass green. It is time to do another application of insect prevention. So this coming month in July, we're going to do another insect prevention and little fertilizer. So a nice slow release nitrogen.
That down.
Yeah, so like Green Maker from Fertilome's awesome. 23-316 is great. If you want an organic fertilizer, I'd do like Milorganite. But sometime this month, even though it's really hot, you want to get a good fertilizer on there, and it's important that you apply it when the grass is dry. So I like to do mine in the evening because the grass is dry. After all day, it's dried out. Apply that fertilizer and then water it either that evening or the next morning before it gets hot the next day, and you'll never have a problem with it burning your grass.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so humate, nice slow-release fertilizer, maybe a water conservation product like Hydrotain or Back to Green to really help your water stretch a lot farther. 30 to 50% less water to do the same job if you're using one of those products.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Awesome.
Now, weeds is another problem. We have grasshoppers and
Everywhere.
we have weeds.
Oh, there's weeds all over the place.
Yeah.
And, of course, the grasshoppers like to eat the weeds, too.
Yeah, it seems like I'm seeing a lot of morning glory, seeing a lot of clover still, and those are things that you find yourself just constantly having to battle.
Puncture vine and burr buttercup have been just horrific, like all over the place. And so we're seeing tons of those just persistent, pesky, difficult weeds. Lots of morning glory, lots of clover. I'm seeing mallow all over the place as well, too. So if it's in your turf, there's some products we can use that, especially this week where the temperatures are cooler. Usually in July, we're telling people, nope, don't spray weeds.
Better hold off.
Wait until we get cooler temperatures. But this week, I was looking at the forecast yesterday. We've got 3 or 4 days in the 80s. And when you get days in the low 80s, 80 degrees to 85 degrees, that's like prime time for killing weeds.
You can do it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So weed-free zone would be my go-to for morning glory, especially. It's like amazing on morning glory. 80-degree daytime temperatures, amazing. It's gonna do an awesome job. In fact, you could spray at 10 o'clock in the morning on Monday, and by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, those weeds will be curling up
Starting to curl.
Yeah. I mean, it does not take very long. In fact, I'll have people come in hours after they've sprayed, and they're like, I love that stuff.
It works.
Yeah, it's like I sprayed this morning, and they're like dying already. I can see them curling up already. So the weed free zone works very, very quickly on a lot of your really hard to kill weeds. So morning glory, thistles, mallow, clover, dandelions, burr buttercup, puncture vine, purslane. It will kill all of those, but it won't hurt turf. So basically, it kills everything except for grass. So you can use it on your grass, won't bother your grass, but it'll basically kill everything else. So you have to be careful as the temperatures get higher because it will volatilize and it will spread. And so you could have it drift over and get your grapes, or it could drift over and damage your roses, or it could drift over and damage, any of your vegetables or flowers as well too. So I've seen a lot of plants that people have brought in and they've sprayed and it turned hot the next day and it volatilized and it spread, and they're like, I don't know why my grapes hips are curling up. Here, to look at this sample,
Right.
it's like, got hit with a weed killer.
Yeah.
And so we've seen quite a bit of that. So daytime temperatures in the low 80s, perfect time to spray.
Okay.
Yeah, really perfect. And then if you're in an area where you've got plants that are much more sensitive, like say you've got some puncture vine that has snuck into your flower beds, or you've got some burr buttercup that's coming up around your squashes or your tomato plants, you can't use the weed-free zone in those areas because it could get onto
your plants.
on the plants, and it's going to kill those because it kills everything except for grass. And so I use Fertilome's Decimate. Now the Decimate works. Like the chemistry is very different from Roundup or Kills-All, but it works kind of the same way. It has to go in through the green leafy part of the plant, and then the plant metabolizes it, starts to break down the cell structure, the leaves start to die. And so the Decimate, it biodegrades in 24 hours. So it's completely gone out of your soil in 24 hours. It doesn't spread through the soil and affect nearby plants, and it is much less likely to drift or to volatilize even in hotter temperatures. And so I've been able to go in and very strategically, very, very surgically spray in my vegetable garden, in my flower beds, and just target individual weeds or areas that have desirable plants right around them. But I've been able to go in and kill the puncture vine that snuck into my squashes, and it works really, really well, and it works fast also. So that's one where you could spray in the morning at 10 o'clock, and by 4 in the afternoon you would see the weeds like dying already. So it works very quickly, biodegrades out of the soil very quickly, and so you can plant right back where you have sprayed the Decimate after 24 hours.
Okay.
Yeah, so very, very quick and super effective on a lot of those hard to kill broadleaf weeds. So last year on, I think it was the 8th of July, I sprayed some Morning Glory, I sprayed some puncture vine, I sprayed some, Japanese clover, and I sprayed some mallow. And I took pictures of them, like the day that I sprayed them. And I went back and took pictures of the same plants 2 days later, and they were just like little brown, crispy critters. There was like nothing left. Yeah. So it does a very, very good job, especially when the temperatures are hot. So great way to control weeds.
We planted late this year, and so our garden, we had tilled it, and then we had left it and hadn't touched it for about a month and a half. And then we wanted to plant, and of course it had overgrown with weeds in that month and a half. So we took that advice. We sprayed with Decimate.
Yeah.
And then 2 days later, we went back out, tilled it up again. And when I did, all of a sudden all these crunchy roots were everywhere. And so great product, because
really does a good job.
It not only kills the plant, but it goes down into the root system. And so now it's been over a month. We haven't had any plants coming back up, any weeds coming back up.
That's good.
Where we sprayed.
That's good.
So,
especially with all the little rainstorms that have come through. It's like I've got a couple spots in my garden where I have to go back through and till. And then some of the plants are really starting to mature. So it's like one thing we definitely need to remind our listeners is your corn. If it's getting close to 12 inches tall, it's time to side dress with a little bit of nitrogen. Mm-hmm. So my corn is about 10 inches. So I'm like really, really close to doing like another application of nitrogen. I put nitrogen down right when I planted, and it's about 10 inches tall, and it's really coming along. And I just planted another batch of corn this week, and we could plant another batch of corn in 2 more weeks once the peas and the spinach and the lettuce and stuff are all gone. Plenty of time. Yeah, plenty of time. We planted on the 20th of July and had corn coming on the end of September, first part of October. So it's a great way to do it. But if your corn is getting close to 12 inches tall, it's time to fertilize it. And my potatoes are really starting to take off. So I'm actually going to run the tiller down the rows of potatoes, and then I'm going to use my furrower, and I'm going to push soil over on top of the potatoes. But before I do that, I'm going to throw a little fertilizer down the potatoes also. So I'll do more of a balanced fertilizer for those. So they'll get like a 16-16-16 fertilizer, where the corn's going to get just straight nitrogen. But I'll fertilize the potatoes, and then I'll push soil from both sides over on top of the potatoes. And then where you cover the potatoes up, they'll produce more. they'll produce more potatoes. Yeah. So once you get that soil really light and fluffy by running the tiller down there, I'll run my furrower, which pushes the soil all to one side, and I will furrow that soil over on top of the potatoes, and we'll get more potatoes. More potatoes.
Yeah.
Everybody wants more potatoes. Yeah. So corn needs to be fertilized.
Keep them buried.
Time to hill up your potatoes, because the potatoes have another month and a half to grow and produce. Early varieties are starting to produce a few small potatoes, but it's time to cover those up and keep them going. And man, my onions are going nuts. Like the best onions I've had for years. Last year, my onions were the pits.
Yeah, I was going to say.
They were terrible. Yeah, they were terrible. This year, they look awesome.
Okay.
I got to get those thinned out. And the carrots, I got to get them thinned one more time. So they're just so thick. We got to thin those. Got to thin those carrots out.
Now, for those who planted peas, some other cold crops, those are getting to the end of their life cycle.
They are. We have basically picked all the peas.
And so time to look at replanting. What would be something good if someone had planted some of those cold crops?
Yeah.
Now they're at the end of that, and they've got that space. Corn, beans. Yeah. Really, there isn't anything that you can't plant.
So at this point, anything that is going to produce in less than 90 days, because 90 days puts us at 1st of October, and that's usually when we hit frost. So anything that's going to produce in less than 90 days. So corn, 70 to 85 days, no problem. So if you plant an early variety of corn, it's going to come on in 70 to 75 days, which puts you the second week of September.
Yeah.
It's like second week of September. Carrots, 80 days, 75 to 80 days. Beets, 75 to 80 days, no problem. Zucchinis, 45 days.
Yeah.
So you could replant some summer squash and have those produce in like 10, not 10 weeks. 6 weeks.
Yeah.
6 weeks.
Okay.
So I planted our zucchini plants right around Memorial Day. So that was the 25th of May, 27th of May. So we planted like right that weekend of Memorial Day. I have 4-inch long zucchinis on my zucchini plants.
They're coming on.
That's how fast they produce. Yeah. So those are super, super quick. But then if you want to plant some cold crops, you could do more cold crops. But I'd probably wait till the end of July. So you could replant your peas end of July, 1st of August. You could replant spinach. You could replant kale. You could replant cabbage, cauliflower, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, lettuces, radishes. So any of those cold crops that we like to plant early on, like in March or April, you could replant all those end of July, first part of August, and have those maturing in September and October when the temperatures are cooler.
Nice.
Yeah, the plants will love it. In fact, that's when the farmers have like the best cabbage, the best Brussels sprouts, the best cauliflower of the season. Is they'll plant a later summer crop so that it will come on in the fall, and that's when the produce is actually the best on some of those cool crops, because they're maturing when daytime temperatures are cooler, nighttime temperatures are cooler, instead of in the middle of summer when it's 95 degrees like right now. So the quality of those cool crops will be much better when you plant them when it's hot and have them mature when it's cool.
Okay.
Yeah, they'll do much, much better. Tomatoes are starting to set fruit, so I like to fertilize my tomatoes all the way up until we start picking ripe fruit. So I'll feed them at least weekly and sometimes twice a week. Compost tea, amazing on the tomatoes, on the peppers. That's kind of what we've been using on our plants. And literally, some of my plants are 4 feet tall already, and they have fruit on them, on my tomato plants. So they're going crazy. And like I said, my peppers are 12 to 18 inches tall, and they already have peppers on them.
Coming on.
Yeah, so they're just going nuts. But keep fertilizing the tomatoes up until you start picking fruit. And then I stop. Okay. I stop fertilizing at that point, and I start to cut the water back to make them think that they're going to die.
And that will then help them
ripen up. I mean, you don't want them to die, but you want them to realize that fall's coming on, and they're getting a little bit less water, a little bit less frequently. It kind of stresses the plants, and they all of a sudden realize, oh, fall's coming. I gotta ripen up. I gotta ripen this fruit. And so it really does get your plants to ripen up a lot faster. But keep feeding, keep controlling diseases. Like there's diseases that will hit the first part of August on tomato plants. And so I will do a preventative fungicide every 2 weeks throughout the summer just to prevent those diseases from getting into the tomato plants.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the squashes, melons, cucumbers, pumpkins, the powdery mildew starts showing up the end of July, 1st of August. So we want to keep after those as well too, because once the mildew gets into your vines like that, they're pretty much done.
So we haven't really talked a lot about fruit trees. And we should mention, we've got about 7 minutes left in the show, things you're seeing with fruit trees right now, any diseases that people need to be aware of.
Cherries are starting to ripen up. So I picked a couple cherries last night, and they are not quite there, but they're really close. If you have not sprayed your cherries for cherry fruit fly, it may be a little bit too late. It just depends on how developed they are. But usually we'll recommend right when they start to color, when you start to see the green cherries start to color up, whether they're kind of going a salmon pink color, that's when you want to spray them. Check the cherries last night. No extra protein in the cherries, which means no worms in the cherries, which is really nice. But they're not quite there. I'm thinking just right after the 4th. They'll be like perfect. And my Bing and my Lambert trees are loaded, and my Royal Anne, which is a blushed cherry, so it's kind of a yellow cherry with a pink blush to it. They're just covered. They're just absolutely covered with fruit. So pretty exciting. We are seeing some peach leaf curl. So starting to see a little bit of peach leaf curl. Definitely seeing some shot hole fungus. So shot hole fungus or Corinium blight gets into all the stone fruits, and it looks like somebody has shot your tree with a shotgun. Like there's little teeny round holes in the leaves, and you'll get little brown spots on the fruit as well too. So this is a really critical time to spray for shot hole, so it does not transfer from the leaves over to the fruit. So anything with copper in it, so copper soap, copper sulfate, the fungicide 5, the complete disease control from Monterey, any of those are very, very effective and safe to use up to the day of harvest. So all those products are all natural, very, very, very effective, and they will do an awesome job on controlling all these diseases. And you can use them up until the day you're going to harvest. So totally safe to use on fruits and vegetables. Very, very effective. But watch those cherries for cherry fruit fly maggots inside the cherries. It's not the most palatable addition to the fruit. Peaches are looking great. They will get the shot hole fungus, so definitely watch for that. And apples and pears, our next application of insecticide for codling moth will be probably around the 14th to the 21st of July. Yeah.
So about 2 to 3 weeks.
Utah State has posted when the next flight is, and they're recommending it's sometime in that 14th to the 21st of July,
middle of the month,
for your next application here in Cache Valley. If you're over in Tremonton or Brigham City, it's about a week to 10 days earlier. Yeah. So if you're listening, we're talking specifically about Cache Valley for the 14th through the 21st of July, but in other parts of the state, it's going to be a little bit sooner. So a week to 10 days, maybe even 2 weeks sooner if the farther south you go.
All right.
Yeah.
We've got about 3 minutes left. Let's mention again a couple things going on at the store this weekend.
Yeah. So we've got fruit trees are 30% off, and we've got a really great selection of fruit trees still. So 30% off on all of our fruit trees. And there's some that are in 5-gallon containers, there's some in 7-gallon, and there's some in 10-gallon. So I have a couple different price points on the trees. And of course, the 10-gallon ones are a lot bigger than the 5-gallon trees. But 30% off all of our fruit trees. And then we've got all of our perennials. Our 1-gallon perennials are on sale for 25% off. And so it's a good time to plant perennials. And even though it's been hot, it's a really good time to transplant plants. So we've been planting flowers, we've been planting vegetables, we've been planting trees, we've been planting shrubs. And you just got to make sure and dig your holes properly and amend the soil, and water with a good root stimulator, mycorrhiza, anything to help get those plants established. And they can handle the heat. I always tell people they do better in your soil at 95 degrees than they do sitting on the concrete in our parking lot,
right? In a tiny
at
little
95
pot.
degrees in a tiny little pot. Yeah, so they're not going to go through that much shock. They're going to shock a little bit because they're being pulled out of their pot and you damage the root system. But you just got to make sure and prune and prepare your soil properly and get those holes nice and big and water with the correct products to really get those plants going again. And you'll experience minimal transplant shock. They'll do just fine. So yeah, good time to get out there and do some planting.
Okay, so fruit trees 30% off. plus also a great deal on perennials.
25% off. And then I do have a few hanging baskets and some annual flowers that we're just kind of starting to clear out and try and find a home for them so somebody get them planted. So some really great discounts on those. Some of those are 60 to 80% off of regular price on a lot of the flowers that we have left over. So good time to get those planted too.
Well, it's a great week. We've got 4th of July coming up on Thursday.
4th of July.
Great time to be downtown. I noticed, again, we'll mention it again next week, but Logan City going to be hosting the WaterWise seminar. That'll be coming up on the 10th of July. Plus, also, you'll have the cruise-in happening next weekend downtown. So, great time. And we appreciate you joining us for the Garden Guide here on KVNU, and we hope to have you back coming up next week.
And calls next week.
Yes, that's what we're hoping for. And if you missed any part of the show, go to kvnutalk.com and check out the podcast, and we'll be back next week.
Keeping you informed 24/7. News Talk KVNU Logan, 610 AM and